Riker Nash hadn't planned on causing an interstellar incident tonight. He'd come to Station Artemis 7 for a simple job, deliver some cargo, collect his payment, and maybe enjoy a drink at one of the station's infamous lounges. Instead, he found himself staring at a royal flush while across the table, one of the most dangerous crime lords in the Orion Arm was turning an interesting shade of purple. The Quantum Lotus Casino sparkled with holographic displays and pulsing light strips that cast ever-changing patterns across the faces of dozens of species. The air was thick with exotic perfumes and the sharp tang of various intoxicants. Riker's enhanced implants filtered out the worst of it, but even they struggled with the sensory overload. "Call," growled Dominion boss Vextral, his crystalline exoskeleton catching the light as he pushed forward a substantial pile of credit chips. The alien crime lord's mandibles clicked in what Riker had learned was amusement. "And I'll raise you something special." Vextral gestured, and two of his guards parted to reveal a striking figure. She stood tall and proud, her silver-white skin seeming to shimmer with its own inner light. Delicate markings in shades of azure traced patterns across her exposed arms and face. Her eyes were the deep purple of distant nebulae, and they fixed on Riker with an intensity that made his cybernetic heart skip a beat. "A Laserian noble," Vextral announced with obvious satisfaction. "Worth more than everything on this table combined." The crowd that had gathered around their high-stakes game murmured in appreciation. Laserians were rarely seen outside their home system, and nobles even less so. Their natural ability to manipulate quantum fields made them both highly valued and deeply feared. "You can't bet a person," Riker said, his augmented eye analyzing the woman's vital signs. Elevated heart rate, but otherwise calm. Too calm for someone being wagered in a casino game. "On this station, everything has a price," Vextral replied. "Besides, Lady Nyra here is already my property. Won her fair and square from a desperate noble house. So, human, do you have the courage to call?" Riker's implants were screaming warnings about the statistical improbability of his hand. 5 consecutive lucky draws defied odds his quantum processor could barely calculate. Someone was cheating, but surprisingly, it wasn't him this time. He looked at Nyra again. She gave him the slightest of nods, so subtle that only his enhanced vision caught it. There was a game being played here, but it wasn't the one on the table. "I call," Riker said, pushing forward everything he had. His entire payment for the cargo run, plus the ship upgrades he'd been saving for. All in. Vextral's mandibles clicked rapidly, full-blown laughter now. He laid down his cards with a flourish. 4 of a kind, all aces. A hand that would win 99 times out of 100. The crowd held its breath as Riker slowly placed his cards on the table. Royal flush, hearts. The only hand that could beat 4 aces. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds before chaos erupted. Vextral's crystalline form actually cracked with rage, a sound like breaking glass cutting through the sudden roar of the crowd. His guards reached for weapons, but the casino's security drones were faster, their warning lights pulsing red as they moved to maintain order. "Impossible!" Vextral shrieked, his translator struggling to keep up with his native tongue. "You cheated." "Funny accusation, coming from you," Riker said calmly, standing up. His combat implants were already mapping exit routes and identifying threats. But the house cameras saw everything. "I played clean." He turned to Nyra, who was already moving gracefully to his side of the table. "My lady, you're free to dash." The rest of his sentence was cut off by the distinctive whine of a plasma weapon powering up. The crowd scattered as Vextral pulled a very illegal hand cannon from somewhere within his crystalline form. "The girl stays," the crime lord hissed. "And so do you, until we determine exactly how you managed this trick." Riker's enhanced reflexes had him moving before the first shot turned the card table into molten slag. He grabbed Nyra's hand and pulled her behind a massive support pillar as more weapons fire filled the air. The casino's security drones engaged their shields, trapping the civilians behind protective barriers while trying to contain the violence. "I hope you have a plan," Naira said, her voice musical even in the chaos. "Because Vextral doesn't lose gracefully." "I always have a plan," Riker replied, his cybernetic eye scanning the room. "Usually several. Most of them terrible." He spotted what he was looking for, a maintenance access panel half hidden behind an ornamental plant. "How do you feel about small spaces?" "Better than I feel about plasma weapons," she said, following his gaze. A small smile played across her lips. "Though I should warn you, helping me escape comes with complications." "Story of my life," Riker muttered. He tapped his neural interface, activating the illegal stealth suite he'd paid far too much for. A shimmer of bent light enveloped them both. "Ready to run?" Naira's answer was to squeeze his hand and pull him into motion. They sprinted across the casino floor as plasma bolts melted the deck plates behind them. Riker's stealth field wouldn't fool security sensors for long, but it didn't have to. They just needed to reach the access panel. They made it just as the stealth field failed. Riker's augmented strength made quick work of the panel, and they slipped into the maintenance tunnel as security alarms began blaring throughout the station. The sound of Vextral's rage followed them into the darkness. "You know," Riker said as they crawled through the cramped space, "I feel like there's a story here. Noble-born Lazirian, illegal casino, angry crime lord." "There is," Naira replied, her markings giving off just enough bioluminescence to light their way. "A rather important one, actually. One that could change the balance of power in this sector." She paused, looking back at him with those nebula-deep eyes. "Still want to help?" Riker grinned. His rational mind, along with all his expensive implants, was telling him to drop her at the nearest safe port and run. But something in those eyes, something in the way she'd stood so proudly even while being wagered like property, had him intrigued. "My lady," he said, "I believe this is the beginning of a beautiful partnership." Behind them, the sounds of pursuit echoed through the maintenance tunnels. Ahead lay uncertainty and probable death. But for the first time since he'd started taking these borderland jobs, Riker felt truly alive. The game was just beginning. The maintenance shaft opened into a dimly lit cargo bay, the massive space eerily empty except for a few abandoned shipping containers. Riker's cybernetic eye switched to thermal scanning, searching for threats as he helped Naira down from the access panel. "My ship's in Bay 17, he said, his augments already plotting the safest route. "If we can reach it before station security locks down the docking rings dash." "They already have," Naira interrupted. Her silver-white skin seemed to pulse with subtle patterns of light, and Riker's sensors detected quantum fluctuations emanating from her. "Vextral owns half the station's security force. We need a different approach." A distant explosion rocked the station, and emergency klaxons began blaring. Riker's neural interface was flooded with security alerts. "They're sealing off sections of the station. We need to move." "Wait." Naira placed her hand against a nearby wall, her azure markings glowing brighter. "There's a Lazirian diplomatic vessel docked in Bay 23. If I can reach it." "Let me guess, more complications?" A small smile played across her lips. "That vessel belongs to those who arranged my capture. They're the ones who hired Vextral to ensure I ended up in his possession." "Your own people betrayed you?" Riker's combat systems highlighted multiple approaching heat signatures. "Why?" "Because I discovered their plan to start a war with the human colonies." Naira's eyes narrowed. "They believe humanity's expansion must be stopped, and they're willing to sacrifice millions to do it." Before Riker could process that revelation, plasma fire scorched the wall beside them. 6 of Vextral's guards had found them, their crystalline armor glinting in the emergency lights. Riker's combat implants kicked into overdrive. Time seemed to slow as targeting solutions and threat assessments flooded his consciousness. He drew his modified pulse pistol and fired 3 precisely calculated shots. 2 guards went down, their armor shattered. Naira raised her hands, and reality itself seemed to ripple. The quantum fluctuations around her intensified, and suddenly 3 of the remaining guards found themselves firing at each other, their perception of reality twisted by her abilities. "Impressive," Riker said, dropping the last guard with a clean headshot. "But we need to move. More will be coming." They sprinted through the cargo bay, Riker's enhanced speed matching Naira's natural Laserian grace. His neural interface connected to the station systems, fighting through layers of security to gather intel. "Bad news," he said as they reached a sealed pressure door. "Station security is reporting directly to a Laserian warship that just dropped out of quantum space. We've got maybe 10 minutes before they dock and deploy troops." Naira's expression hardened. That would be the Quantum Blade. Admiral Ven's flagship. He's the one behind all of this, the conspiracy, my capture, everything. Riker's cybernetic eye scanned the pressure door while his hands moved over the control panel. "Tell me more about this war they want. Why now?" "Humanity's quantum drive technology is advancing too quickly," Naira explained, keeping watch while he worked. "Some of our leaders fear you'll soon match or exceed our capabilities. They want to strike first, while they still have the advantage. And you disagree? I believe cooperation is possible. That our species could achieve something greater together." She turned to him, her nebula-deep eyes intense. "That's why they branded me a traitor and arranged my capture. Dead, I'd be a martyr to their cause. Alive and in Vextral's possession, I'd be a symbol of human barbarism, justifying their aggression." The door slid open with a hydraulic hiss. Beyond it lay a maze of corridors leading to the diplomatic docking bays. Riker's systems detected multiple security teams converging on their position. "Well," he said, checking his weapons charge, "can't let them start a war. Bad for business." A genuine smile lit up Naira's face, making her markings pulse with inner light. "You're taking this rather well. I'm used to jobs going sideways. Though preventing an interstellar war is a new one." His neural interface pinged a warning, the Quantum Blade was initiating docking procedures. "How do you feel about stealing a diplomatic vessel?" "Technically, it belongs to my house," Naira said, her hands already beginning to glow with quantum energy. "But we'll have to fight through Admiral Ven's personal guard to reach it." The station shook again, more violently this time. Riker's interfaces reported multiple security breaches throughout the station. Vextral was tearing the place apart looking for them. "Fighting I can handle," Riker said, his combat systems activating combat optimization protocols. "It's the political implications I'm worried about." Naira's laugh was like crystalline chimes. "Steal a ship, expose a conspiracy, prevent a war, and survive Admiral Ven's wrath. Anything else?" "Yeah," Riker grinned, his cybernetics highlighting the most defensible route to Bay 23. "Try not to fall in love with me. I hear relationships between humans and Laserians are complicated." "Too late for that warning," Naira said softly, and before Riker's enhanced reflexes could react, she kissed him. The quantum energy surrounding her surged, and for a moment, his implants overloaded with impossible data. When she pulled back, her eyes were glowing with power. "Now, shall we go steal my ship?" Riker's systems took a full second to reboot, but his grin never faltered. "Lead the way, my lady. I've got your back." Together, they plunged into the chaos of the station's corridors, racing against time to prevent a war and maybe, just maybe, change the course of human-Laserian relations forever. The only question was whether they'd live long enough to see it happen. The diplomatic vessel's quantum engines hummed to life as Riker's fingers danced across the controls. His neural interface merged with the ship's systems, the familiar rush of data flooding his consciousness. Beside him, Naira worked her own console, her markings pulsing with concentrated energy as she bypassed the security protocols. Admiral Ven's forces are deploying throughout the station, she announced, her voice tight with tension. And Vextral's men are engaging them. It seems their alliance is fracturing. Nothing like a little betrayal to ruin a perfectly good conspiracy, Riker muttered, his cybernetic eye tracking multiple threats through the viewscreen. The docking bay was rapidly filling with both crystalline armored station security and the sleek-suited Lazirian royal guards. Please tell me you've got control of the weapons systems. A slight smile curved Naira's lips as several defensive turrets emerged from the ship's hull. Of course. Though I'd prefer not to destroy my own people's forces if we can avoid it. How about just their shields? Riker's combat systems calculated optimal firing solutions. Give them something to think about besides stopping us? The ship's turrets came to life, precise bursts of quantum energy disrupting shield generators and weapon systems. The bay erupted into chaos as both forces scrambled for cover. Station Control is initiating emergency protocols, Riker reported, his implants processing the flood of data. Containment fields are activating. If we don't leave now, we'll be trapped, Naira finished. Her hands moved in complex patterns, quantum energy flowing from her markings into the ship's systems. I can disrupt the containment field, but only for a few seconds. We'll have one chance. Through the view screen, they watched as Admiral Ven himself strode into the bay, his ornate armor gleaming with power. The Admiral's face was a mask of cold fury as he raised his hand, quantum energy gathering around him. Naira, he called, his voice carried through the ship's comm systems. You disappoint your people. Your father would be ashamed. My father, Naira replied, her voice like steel, taught me to protect our people from those who would sacrifice honor for power. What would he think of your plans, uncle? Riker's head snapped toward her. Uncle? A story for later, she said quietly. If we survive the next 30 seconds. Admiral Ven's response was to launch a devastating quantum blast at their ship. The energy crashed against their shields, making the entire vessel shudder. Now! Naira shouted, her markings blazing with light. Reality itself seemed to bend around them as she forced open a gap in the containment field. Riker's augmented reflexes took over. The ship shot forward, threading the needle between closing emergency bulkheads. Behind them, the Admiral's fury manifested as waves of quantum destruction, but they were already breaking free of the station's artificial gravity. Multiple vessels detecting from quantum space, Riker reported, his systems tracking the new arrivals. Lazirian warships. They're charging weapons. Of course they are. Naira's hands never stopped moving across the controls. My uncle doesn't leave loose ends. Especially family ones. The space around them lit up with weapons fire. Riker's enhanced piloting skills, combined with Naira's quantum manipulation, kept them just ahead of destruction. But they were severely outgunned. We need somewhere to hide, Riker said, his tactical systems searching for options. Somewhere they won't follow. A dangerous smile crossed Naira's face. The quantum veil. It's a region of space where normal physics breaks down. Most ships can't survive there, but this vessel was specially designed for quantum navigation. And the warships? Would be torn apart if they followed. She met his eyes. But even in this ship, our chances of survival are not optimal. Riker grinned. Not optimal is my specialty. His neural interface plotted the course as more quantum torpedoes streaked past them. Besides, we need time to plan our next move. Can't expose a conspiracy if we're atomized. Speaking of conspiracies, Naira said, her expression growing serious, there's something you should know. Something I discovered before they caught me. She paused, deflecting another blast of energy. Admiral then isn't working alone. He has human allies. What? Certain corporations, military officials, even some colonial governors. They all profit from conflict between our species. Her markings pulsed with agitation. They've been manipulating both sides, pushing us toward war. Before Riker could process this revelation, proximity alarms screamed through his neural interface. A massive quantum torpedo was closing fast, too fast to evade. Naira's hands shot out, quantum energy streaming from her body. The torpedo detonated prematurely, but the blast caught the edge of their shield. Warning lights flooded the bridge as systems began to fail. The veil, Naira gasped, clearly strained from the energy expenditure. It's our only chance. Ahead of them, space itself seemed to ripple and distort. The quantum veil lived up to its name, a curtain of reality-bending energy that made Riker's cybernetic eye throw up error messages just from scanning it. You know, he said, taking Naira's hand as he engaged the quantum drive, when I woke up this morning, I didn't expect to be diving into a physics-breaking anomaly with a quantum-powered princess while being chased by her murderous uncle. Despite their dire situation, Naira laughed. And here I didn't expect to fall for a cybernetically enhanced human who won me in a rigged card game. Her fingers intertwined with his. Ready to make history? With you? Always. The ship plunged into the veil, reality warping around them as they left normal space behind. Whether they would survive to expose the conspiracy and prevent the war remained to be seen. But in that moment, as physics broke down around them and Naira's hand tightened in his, Riker knew he wouldn't want to be anywhere else. Inside the quantum veil, reality itself was negotiable. Colors that had no names rippled across the view screen, and Riker's cybernetic implants struggled to process what they were seeing. The ship's systems flickered between active and inactive states, sometimes existing in both simultaneously. Well, he said, watching as his own hand seemed to phase in and out of existence, this is new. Naira's fingers moved across the controls with practiced precision, her markings glowing brighter than ever. The veil operates on quantum uncertainty principles. Multiple realities existing simultaneously. She glanced at him, her nebula-deep eyes reflecting impossible light. Your implants trying to make sense of it? They gave up about 30 seconds ago. Riker's neural interface was feeding him garbage data, random strings of numbers and contradictory sensor readings. How are we not dead yet? Lazarian ships like this one are designed to navigate quantum space. Her markings pulsed in rhythm with the ship's fluctuating systems. And my abilities help stabilize our local reality bubble. But we can't stay here long. Even with protection, the veil will eventually tear us apart. As if to emphasize her point, a section of the hull briefly ceased to exist before snapping back into place. Warning alerts screamed through Riker's malfunctioning systems. So we've bought some time, he said, forcing his implants into diagnostic mode. Want to tell me more about these human conspirators working with your uncle? Naira's expression darkened. Corporate interests mostly. Quantum Technologies Incorporated, Stellar Dynamics, the Nova Consortium. They've been sabotaging peace talks for years, profiting from the arms race between our species. I know those companies, Riker said. They supplied most of my implants. But they're not military contractors. No, they're something worse. Naira pulled up a holographic display that flickered between multiple states of existence. They're quantum tech developers. And they've been stealing Lazarian secrets through industrial espionage. The display stabilized long enough to show financial records, classified documents, and surveillance footage. My uncle provides them with our technology, they provide him with political support and intelligence on human military movements. Both sides build up arms, tensions rise, and everyone profits from the coming war. Riker processed this while watching reality fracture and reform around their ship. We'll need proof. Something concrete enough to convince both governments. I have it. Naira's fingers danced through the quantum-distorted holograms. Before my capture, I downloaded files from my uncle's private database. Encrypted them in my quantum signature. That's why they couldn't just kill me, they needed me alive to access the data. And now? Now we need to get this information to people who can use it. I have contacts in both governments, people I trust. She looked at him seriously. But we'll have to split up to reach them. Before Riker could respond, the ship shuddered violently. Through the chaos of the veil, something massive was taking shape. Impossible, Naira whispered, her markings flaring with alarm. Nothing that size could survive in here. But there it was, a fortress of twisted metal and quantum energy, hanging in the void like a demon's castle. As they watched, parts of it shifted between different configurations, as if multiple versions of the structure were trying to exist simultaneously. A quantum engineering station, Naira realized, her voice filled with horror. They've built a base inside the veil itself. This is how they've been developing their stolen technology, by experimenting where no one could find them. Riker's tactical systems finally managed to get a partial scan. It's massive. And if I'm reading this right, there are at least a dozen ships docked there. Both human and Laserian designs. The conspiracy in physical form, Naira said bitterly. My uncle's true legacy, humans and Laserians working together after all, but for profit and power instead of peace. New alerts flashed through Riker's neural interface. They're scanning us. Quantum-based targeting systems powering up. We need to run, Naira said, but her hands weren't moving toward the controls. Instead, she was staring at the fortress with an intensity that made her markings pulse like miniature stars. Riker knew that look. You want to go in there? This is it, proof that can't be denied. Not just files and records, but physical evidence of the collaboration. She turned to him, her eyes blazing with quantum fire. We'll never have a better chance. It's suicide, Riker pointed out as the first quantum torpedoes began launching from the fortress. Even if we could get inside Dash. We can. Naira's voice was steel and starfire. My quantum signature can bypass their security. I helped design some of these systems before I discovered what they were really for. And your cybernetics. She paused, deflecting an incoming torpedo with a gesture. They're partially based on stolen Laserian tech. They'll interface with the fortress's systems. Riker's combat protocols were screaming at him to retreat. The odds of survival were approaching zero. But he'd stopped listening to odds the moment he'd seen Naira in that casino. You realize, he said, already plotting attack vectors through the quantum chaos, that this is exactly the kind of crazy plan that gets people killed in heroic last stands? Naira smiled, and somehow even in the reality-bending madness of the veil, it was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Then let's make it count. Together, they turned their ship toward the impossible fortress. Around them, reality continued to fracture and reform, but in that moment, their purpose was quantum certain. They would expose the conspiracy, prevent the war, or tear down the laws of physics trying. The only question was which would break first, the fortress or reality itself. The fortress loomed before them like a wound in reality, its quantum-shifted architecture defying the laws of physics. Riker's implants had given up trying to map its constantly changing layout, instead focusing on immediate threats as they approached. Their defense grid is locked onto us, he reported, watching multiple weapon systems phase between states of existence. Even with your quantum abilities, we can't take many direct hits. Naira's markings pulsed with concentrated power as she manipulated the quantum fields around their ship. We don't need to fight them. We just need to get inside. Her fingers danced across the controls, sending streams of quantum data into the fortress's systems. Their docking bay 7 is experiencing a recursive quantum loop. For the next few minutes, it exists in a state of both being open and closed. Schrödinger's airlock? Riker's enhanced reflexes guided their ship toward the fluctuating opening. I'm starting to hate quantum physics. They slipped through the paradoxical entry point just as the fortress's main weapons opened fire. Reality shuddered around them as they made a hard landing, the ship's systems struggling to adapt to the chaotic quantum environment. The good news, Naira said as they prepared to leave the relative safety of their vessel, is that the quantum instability makes it harder for them to track us. The bad news is that we can't trust anything we see, Riker finished, watching as corridors shifted and reformed ahead of them. His tactical systems were detecting multiple life signs, but they seemed to exist in several places simultaneously. Please tell me you have a plan. The quantum core. Naira projected a holographic map that flickered between different configurations. It's the heart of their operation. All their research, all their stolen technology, everything flows through it. If we can access it, we can transmit proof of the conspiracy to every major government in the sector. And your uncle? He'll be there. Her expression hardened. The core requires constant quantum stabilization. As the most powerful quantum manipulator in the sector, he's the only one who can maintain it for extended periods. They moved through corridors that sometimes existed and sometimes didn't, avoiding patrol patterns that followed quantum probability curves. Riker's combat implants adapted as best they could, learning to predict the moments when reality would be most stable. Their first real resistance came at a security checkpoint that existed in 3 different configurations simultaneously. Guards in both human and Laserian armor opened fire with quantum-phased weapons. Riker's enhanced reflexes allowed him to target the points where the multiple realities overlapped, his modified pulse pistol dropping guards that existed in all potential states. Beside him, Naira's powers reached out to stabilize local space, creating patches of normal physics where they could fight effectively. You know, Riker said as they fought their way deeper into the fortress, most couples have dinner dates before trying to overthrow criminal conspiracies. Naira's laugh was like starlight breaking through quantum chaos. Boring. She twisted reality around an approaching squad, causing them to phase into a wall. Besides, I thought humans appreciated spontaneity. Their banter was cut short as they reached the approach to the quantum core. The massive chamber pulsed with energy that made Riker's cybernetics scream in protest. And there, suspended in the heart of the quantum maelstrom, was Admiral Venn. The Admiral floated in a web of energy, his armor integrated directly into the core's systems. His eyes opened as they entered, and reality itself seemed to shudder at his attention. "My dear niece," he said, his voice echoing through multiple versions of existence. "Have you come to witness the future you tried to prevent?" "The only future you're building is one of death and profit," Naira replied, her markings blazing with power. "We have proof of everything, the corporate deals, the stolen technology, the manufactured conflicts." "Proof?" The Admiral laughed, and quantum lightning crackled through the chamber. "I've rewritten the laws of physics themselves. Do you think your evidence matters anymore? In here, I am God." As if to demonstrate, he gestured. Reality rippled, and suddenly Riker found himself being torn apart at the quantum level. His implants fired emergency protocols, trying to hold his atoms together as multiple versions of himself tried to exist simultaneously. "Stop." Naira's power reached out, creating a bubble of stable space around them. "Your hatred of humans has blinded you to the truth. Look at what they've achieved, how they've adapted to quantum technology. We could learn from each other, grow together." "They are children playing with forces they don't understand," Venn snarled. "Forces that belong to us." The quantum core pulsed, and waves of probability crashed against Naira's defenses. Riker could see the strain in her face as she held back her uncle's power. But while they were focused on each other, Riker's neural interface was busy. His implants, based on stolen Laserian tech, were establishing a connection with the core's systems. If he could just hold together long enough. "You're right about one thing," he gasped through the quantum pain. "We don't fully understand these forces. But we understand enough to do this." His cybernetics launched a cascade of conflicting commands into the core. Multiple realities tried to execute simultaneously, creating a feedback loop of paradox. The Admiral's eyes widened as he realized what was happening. "No. You'll destroy everything." "Not everything," Naira said, understanding dawning in her quantum-bright eyes. "Just the impossibilities you've created here." She reached out with her power, not fighting the chaos but guiding it. Reality began to collapse toward a single possibility, the most stable one, the one that existed before Ven's experiments began tearing holes in physics. "The core is transmitting." Riker's implants confirmed that their evidence was broadcasting on all frequencies, quantum-coded so it couldn't be blocked or denied. "But we've got about 2 minutes before this place stops existing." Admiral Ven screamed in rage and denial as his fortress began to dissolve around him. He reached out with all his power, trying to maintain the quantum uncertainty that gave him godlike control. "Naira!" Riker called out as reality started to solidify. "We need to go." But she was focused on her uncle, tears streaming down her face as her markings pulsed with power. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Then she released her quantum energy in a massive burst, forcing the local universe to choose a single state of existence. The Admiral's scream cut off as the quantum core collapsed. Riker grabbed Naira and ran, his implants plotting the now stable route back to their ship. Behind them, the impossible fortress was unwriting itself from reality. They made it to their vessel with seconds to spare. As they fled back through the quantum veil, they watched the fortress fade from existence, taking with it all trace of the Admiral's mad experiments. Hours later, safely back in normal space, they monitored the quantum transmissions spreading across the sector. Both human and Laserian authorities were mobilizing to arrest the conspirators. The corporate executives, the corrupt officials, all of them were being exposed. "So," Riker said, watching Naira as she processed the news of her uncle's fate, "what happens now?" She turned to him, and despite everything they'd lost, her smile still outshone the stars. Now we build something new. Something better." Her hand found his. "Together?" Riker pulled her close, his cybernetic heart beating in perfect rhythm with her quantum pulse. "Together," he agreed. "After all, someone needs to show both our peoples that humans and Laserians make a pretty good team." Their ship sailed through normal space, leaving the quantum chaos behind. But as they embraced, reality seemed to shift just slightly around them, not from any quantum effect, but from the simple, universe-changing power of two people from different worlds choosing to face the future as one.